Hello everyone, my name is David Benzel and welcome to our webinar for this month entitled How to Bulletproof Your Relationship with Your Child. I was going to say how to build a bulletproof relationship. Well, it's the same thing. The benefits of choice versus control. This is a webinar that we created about 2 years ago. We did it one time 2 years ago, and it had such a popular response. We got so many comments that I thought it would be good to resurrect it here this month and to share the content with you again. There's about 40 minutes of content, and then I'm going to open it up to questions. If you'll notice, there's a toolbar connected with this WebEx system, and you can hit the chat function there, a little chat function. It's like instant messaging, and you can write a question to me, whether it's specific to this topic or something related to it. I'm not fussy about what questions you ask. So feel free to jot down some things or write them in, but I will get through the main part of the content before I jump to those questions. The entire webinar is being recorded. And the reason we record it, of course, is that we have a lot of folks who are kind of loyal fans of these webinars that we do once a month, but sometimes they're not available to listen to the live presentation. So by recording it, I will send out the link to the recording sometime tomorrow, Friday, and I'll send that link out and you will be able to access the whole entire presentation, the visual, the audio, the whole thing. And in that case, you'll be able to download it, you can play it back, you can pause, you can do anything you want to do. It's a pretty versatile system, so I kind of like it. Let's see if there's anything else I wanted to let you know. If this is your first time with us, I want you to know that Growing Champions for Life is a nonprofit organization that we created about 10 years ago now, with really the main intent was to help the adults in the youth sport equation. In other words, parents, coaches in particular. We like providing strategies and excuse me, educational content, educational resources, because we realize that athletes get coached tremendously and frequently. Coaches can get coaching, but oftentimes parents are the most undercoached group in sports. And I know because I am a parent. I'm probably older than some of you. My kids are older than your children, and that's the only reason I'm doing this. I'm just farther along on the journey than you are. Maybe down the road, one of you will be doing this instead of me. But I always tell my audiences that I'm a recovering youth sport parent. That is to admit to you that I did not do everything perfectly. I learned a lot along the way. And as a result of the mistakes I made and the lessons I learned, we started creating content that would help other parents. And because I was also an elite level coach in my sport, I've also created a body of work for coaches to help them. So before we jump into the content, I want to show you what's coming up next month, because we have a few more people who are just jumping on the call now. Give your child courage for change. The reason for this webinar on change is that our children live in a world that is changing at a much faster rate than the world that you and I grew up in. And we had to grow up with change. But the problem with change is that it is accelerating. So when it could be something as simple as, I got a new coach, I've got a new teacher, I've got new teammates, I'm playing a new position, all kinds of change in children's lives, and helping them deal with change and learn how to cope with change in constructive ways so that they are not tilted off their axis, so they don't lose their equilibrium, because change is coming. And guess what? It's coming faster and faster. The date for this one, Thursday, October 17th. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about how to teach your children to cope with the kind of change that they're experiencing in school, in their relationships, in their sport in particular, that's what we're going to talk about. All right, so let's jump right into how to bulletproof your relationship with your child. Is there anything more important to you other than perhaps the relationship with your partner? Is there anything on this planet more important to you than the relationship with your child? And I realized early on that I had in my mind's eye a vision of what I wanted the relationship to be like. I don't know if you've experienced that also, but I know that as I, came into parenting, and all of a sudden, in my case, we had two, a boy and a girl. Our daughter is the older of the two. She's 35 now, and my son is 31. So, like I said, my children are older than yours. Both of them were athletes in multiple sports. Both of my children made it to the professional level in their respective sports. Um, but I had a picture in my head of what kind of dad I wanted to be, and sometimes the picture didn't fit the reality. And maybe you've had that happen. Maybe sometimes the picture you have in your head of the kind of mom or dad you want to be is not what shows up every day. And so I think it's important for us to admit we should have a vision in our head of what the ideal relationship looks like, sounds like, and feels like. Because this relationship, well, not only is it important, but we want it to be long lasting. I mentioned on the front page that we're going to be taking some material tonight from William Glasser's book called Choice Theory. And one of the things that Glasser says in his book is that each child, as they become more and more aware of life and living in a family, there is a concept in their mind of what a quality world should be like. And the three elements that make up a child's quality world, and by the way, this was a concept that you and I wrestled with and maybe still wrestle with to this day. Our quality world means our ideal life, our ideal world. And the three things we want in our quality world are people that we most want to be with, the people we most want to have in our surroundings. So for a child, it's loving parents. It could be, really close friends. It could be a great teacher. What image do you have in your head, even right now, of the people you most want to be with? So that's part of a child's quality world. And when those people are missing, then that means part of his quality world is missing. The second thing would be the things we most want to own or experience. So as we grow up, one of the things most of us want to own is some kind of a dwelling place, a home, or an apartment. It doesn't matter whether you own it or rent it. The point is most of us want to own a dwelling place or have at our disposal a safe environment. And some people definitely want to experience marriage, or they want to experience being a parent. Some children want to experience being an athlete. So this second thing refers to the things we most want to own or experience in our lives. If those things are there to some degree, we feel like our quality world is being fulfilled. If those things are absent, like safety and security, then part of our quality world is not being fulfilled and we feel threatened. And then the third element would be a system of beliefs that govern our behavior. In other words, we actually long for some rules, some guidelines, some things that we can count on that work, that create justice and fairness. And you've probably heard that children who are brought up with no boundaries whatsoever actually are angry about it. They are resentful of the fact that there's no boundaries. Children want a system of beliefs that say these are the rules, these are the values, this is how we're going to behave around here. And if they can identify that system and see that it works, it also makes up for their quality world. So these are the three things that a child longs for, even if it's on a subconscious level. The people they most want in their life, the things they want to own or experience, and a system of beliefs that they can use to govern their world. So now along comes this person called mom or dad, who is older and, of course, wiser, and we think to ourselves, I know what's best for you. And most of the time, we're right. We do know what's best for our children. But the problem comes when we change that to, now, how do I get you to do what I want you to do? So I'm starting to paint a picture for you here of what threatens relationships with our children. Before we can solve the problem and make it bulletproof, we have to understand what is undermining these relationships we have with our kids. So once we realize that we as parents are wiser, older, did you ever see the movie Matilda? Danny DeVito is the dad, and he says to his little girl, look, do what I tell you to do. I'm big, you're little. I'm smart, you're dumb. And that's his whole attitude toward his child. Of course, the funny thing about the movie is that his daughter is much wiser than he is. But once a parent takes on this position, now how do I get you to do what I want you to do? This becomes an issue of control. And the child will find themselves, especially as they approach the teenage years, suffering from some misery because what they're thinking is, how can I live my own life but still get along with these people I need? I need and love my parents, but I'm having so much trouble getting along with them because they keep trying to make me do stuff I don't want to do. Now, I want you to think carefully about this sentence. How do I get you to do what I want you to do? In other words, what tactics can I use to force, manipulate, or bribe you into doing what I want you to do? And the child's response to that, because every child at some point in their life wants to experience autonomy. That means they want to have a sense of ownership and control over their life. How can I live my own life and still get along with these people I desperately need in my quality world? So what happens, unfortunately, is this battle goes on between what parents know is best for their kids and their need for autonomy and control. The need to be right takes priority over the health of the relationship. This is the first sign of a crumbling relationship, when we as parents feel that we have to be right on all issues, and we have to be right all the time. It takes priority over even the health of the relationship. So let's play this out a little bit. Let's see where this goes. It leads to one of two of the possible psychologies in the world. There's two possible psychologies. One is called external control. And it goes like this: punish the people who are doing wrong so they will do what we say is right, and then reward them so they keep doing what we want them to do. This fundamental psychology has to do with carrot and stick, or in this case, belt, right? Um, and the carrot and stick mentality plays off the fundamental truth that all human beings respond to pain and pleasure. So if I make you uncomfortable enough, if I treat you to enough discomfort or pain, I can hopefully get you to do what I want you to do. Or if I put an attractive enough carrot out in front of you, perhaps I can manipulate you to do what I want you to do by use of this carrot. So as this plays out, the unintended consequence is that it destroys personal freedom. We end up creating in our children a belief that others can make them feel the way they feel and make them do the things that we want them to do. When I say it destroys personal freedom, what it means is kids start to then say things like, I have to clean my room, I have to mow the grass, I have to do my homework. Instead of, man, I want to get my homework done. I really want to get the grass cut because it helps the family. I want to get my room clean. It's not because I enjoy cleaning my room, but I want it to look good, and I want to help around the house because it makes my parents happy. See, I want to isn't in there because we've created a system where kids are manipulated into doing what we want them to do, and they end up believing that others can make them feel the way they feel. So we hear our kids say, you make me feel crazy, you make me feel embarrassed, you make me feel angry, you make me feel sad. You've probably heard that. When you hear those sentences, or even if you've heard yourself say it, we're really claiming that other people make us feel the way we feel. Well, that's not actually true. That's a lie, but we've come to believe it because of the manipulation that's going on. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Strategies used by people in the one-up position. One-up position means anybody who is in a position of authority one step up from anyone else. So mom and dad are in the one-up position over their children. A manager is in a one-up position over their employees. A teacher is in a one-up position over her students in the classroom. Well, people have learned from their ancestors, in other words, from their own parents, that this works to ridicule, criticize, coerce, blame, punish, complain, manipulate, bribe, nag, and badger. We've learned that those things work in getting people in the one down position to do what we want them to do. But those in the one down position find themselves longing for the day when they get to do that to someone else. In other words, I can hardly wait till I'm in the one up position over someone so I can have that kind of power. And guess when that is? Well, that'll be when I become a teacher, a coach, a leader, a business manager, a politician, parent, supervisor, or religious leader. When I get to one of those positions, so you see what I'm saying? We end up creating a whole nother generation of people who believe this is how you get things done. And it's really sad because it becomes self-perpetuating that there's a whole series of behaviors here that create this belief that others make us feel the way we feel, others make us do what we want, what they want us to do, and I can hardly wait till I get my chance to do it to somebody else. Well, let's look at the three laws then of choice theory, because there are three fundamental laws of how choice trumps control, and that's where we're headed with this, is about the idea of creating an opportunity for wise choices in our children instead of controlling them. So here's rule number one. The only person's behavior we can control is our own. It looks like you can control another person's behavior, but it is an illusion. The only person's behavior we can actually control is our own. Rule number two, all we can give and receive from others is information. That's right. When we tell somebody, either with our actions or our words, that we're angry with them, all that is a piece of information. By itself, it doesn't necessarily make them do anything, right? All we are is giving them information that I am angry or I am sad, I am frustrated, I am jealous. All of that is just information. What they do with it is based on a choice, because everything we then think, do, or say is actually a choice. Our responses to the information we get from other people is actually a choice. We choose to be angry. We choose to be jealous. We choose to be sad. We choose to be happy. Everything we think, say, or do is actually a choice. And yet we will go on in our relationships trying to get people to do what we want them to do. And they will claim that we made them do it. See, there's fundamental, I guess, rules of the jungle here that we have to come to grips with and agree on, because otherwise we're living a lie. We're living an illusion. So how do we actually bulletproof this relationship? Well, the first thing is we should, as parents, have as an underlying rule, and again, I take this as a quote right from William Glasser's book. He says, don't choose to do anything with a child whom you want to grow up to be happy, successful, and close to you. Don't do anything with that child that you believe will increase the distance between you. Now, I caution you here, he's not saying that you shouldn't ever discipline a child. He's not saying that. He's not saying that you shouldn't ever correct a child or provide guidance. He's not saying you shouldn't provide boundaries, even some non-negotiables. But he say, don't do anything with this child whom you want to grow up to be happy, successful, and close to you that you believe will increase the distance between you. In other words, it will drive a permanent wedge between you. Because whatever that is, it's not worth it in the long run. It's not worth it in the long run. So let's talk about where there's room for choice and where there's not. If we're going to give our children choices, it should actually be over things where they can learn a lesson. For instance, bedtime. Some families go to war every night over bedtime. And there's a pretty sound argument that says, well, why don't we teach our children to figure out what bedtime is best for them as long as they're in their room quiet and not disturbing anyone. If they aren't ready to go to sleep yet, that's fine. But we can give them the choice to fall asleep when you want to. You just have to be in your room and be quiet, reading, or something like that. And you can set guidelines around that. But to go to war over bedtime, oh my goodness, how painful and unnecessary. Same thing with this whole idea of the clean plate club. Now, what I've seen done that I think made so much more sense, because I grew up in a family where, my grandfather used to say, hey, you got to belong to the clean plate club. That means you have to eat everything on your plate. And so did my wife. And her brother would sit at the table with some of his vegetables still there and would purposely not eat them because he was determined not to be controlled. And he literally was told, you'll sit there until you eat those vegetables. And he would sit there for 3 hours and not eat them because he was in a power struggle with his parents over those last few bites of green beans. Well, what good did that do anybody but drive a wedge of resentment and resistance between him and his parents? So let's teach our kids to take the portion of food that they think they need, right? And if they don't eat it, once dinner's cleaned up, no, there isn't any more food. We had dinner and it's gone now. So you need to eat your meal at dinner so that you have adequate nourishment to get through the rest of, until the next meal. It doesn't mean you have to then all of a sudden wait on them and create new meals because they didn't eat when food was there. Even clothing, what to wear to school. My son went to school with a couple of boys whose mother dressed them all the way through middle school and into high school. Mom picked out their clothes every single day. They had no choice. Now, my son wanted to wear costumes to school when he was in, like kindergarten. He wanted to go as Batman, Superman, Robin Hood, you name it. He wanted to wear different costumes. And so we didn't want to rob him of his choice. So what we did is we put parameters around it. On one part of the closet were all the costumes, and we said, these are not school clothes. But over here on the other side of the closet are all the clothing that's appropriate for school. So you can choose anything you want to from this side of the closet where there's school clothing, but not from this side. Go ahead and feel powerful, but only from this side of the closet. Let children choose their clothing. These are areas where we can give them that sense of choice, autonomy, some freedom, and it can still have boundaries around it. We can say bedtime is any time, from 8:30 to 10. You decide when you're sleepy, but at 9 o'clock, we're all going to bed and you must be in your room and be quiet and you can stay awake until you feel tired. When kids go to school the next day and they stayed up too late, eventually they start to figure it out. What about the non-negotiables? This is just as important a list. There are certain things that are non-negotiable. Going to school is not a choice. It's clear from the beginning that we are going to school and we're going to go to school on time. This is not one of the areas where you have choice. Safety issues is another area that is a non-negotiable because it is in everyone's best interest that we honor these safety things like wearing your seatbelt or getting in the car seat, all of those things. And pretty soon there's no battle over it because it's just not one of the choices. But if there are other choices, then we don't have to go to war over these choices. Health concerns, these are non-negotiables. When it's time to get a vaccination, go to the doctor for a checkup, whatever it might be, going to the dentist, the health concerns are not optional. Whatever your family decides and what your family practices are. So I guess the point of this page is just to point out that we can have certain things where there's room for choice and other things that are non-negotiable. My wife, just to share with you the difference between how my wife and I think, she was always bothered by the fact that my son's bedroom wasn't very neat and tidy. In fact, it looked a little bit more like a dumpster exploded in there much of the time. And I had a different perspective. My rule was never create work for someone else. In our common areas of the house, you're not welcome to leave your shoes or your coat or your underwear or anything else, your socks, Do not create work for other people in the common areas of the house. You must be respectful of that. What you do in your own room is up to you, and you will have to live with the degree of organization that you've decided to have in your room. It is your room. That was my attitude. So we had a little struggle, my wife and I, over this because I said this is his area. Let him choose. The thing that's so interesting about it is that now, a couple of years ago, he got his own, his first real career after college, got his own apartment, and we went over to visit. And guess what? He keeps his apartment extremely organized, neat, and clean. And I think to myself, I'm so glad that I didn't go to war over and over and over again when he was in grade school and middle school. We taught him what a neat and tidy, organized house can look like and the benefits of that by the way we kept our areas. But it didn't click for him until he was on his own. And now he finds that that's really advantageous. Sometimes kids catch on a little later than we want them to. How about our conversations? Let's take a look at external control conversations versus choice theory alternatives. Here's an example. If you've heard yourself say this, how many times do I have to tell you bedtime is 9 o'clock? No television night if you don't go right to bed now. So there's the threat. Did you hear the threat? The threat is no television tomorrow night if you don't go to bed right now. The choice theory alternative would sound like this. As long as you're quiet and you don't disturb anyone, you can go to bed when you get sleepy. But before I get too sleepy, would you like me to read with you? So in other words, we're providing an alternative that could accomplish the same thing. Would you like me to read with you? Here's another example. You wanted the dog. Well, I'll tell you, I'm sick and tired of walking the dog. She's going to the pound if you don't start taking better care of her. Once again, a threat in order to get someone to do what you want them to do. What would an alternative be? We have a dog. I love her, and I'm not going to get rid of her. But I am tired of being the only one who walks her or being told, I'll do it later. The dog needs some care. Now, how can we work out this problem? So there's something that has to be worked out. We're not going to use a threat, but we're going to make the child aware that they have a responsibility to help out with this. How are we going to fix this problem? Here's a common one. Do your homework now. I don't care what it is. You have to do it or no video games. Again, the threat, some kind of manipulation. Okay, I'm not going to argue with you. Let's look at that homework. Let's look it over together to see if you understand it. And I'll be here to help you if you get stuck. See, that's a different kind of invitation. It's a whole different environment around the homework issue. And I've talked to parents who said that they go to war over homework every night. One mom told me she'd sit at the kitchen table right after dinner with her child for 2 or 3 hours battling, trying to make him do his homework. A better choice would be, let's teach them early on how important doing homework is, and then let them choose the consequences that come from doing homework or not doing it. And I believe the teachers should deliver the consequences, both the good ones and the unpleasant ones for not doing your homework. I never wanted to stress my relationship with my child over doing the homework or not doing it. I want to be there to help and support, but I want them to learn to take responsibility for it. Oh, here's one that's sensitive for some folks. Are you crazy? No child of mine will ever get her nose pierced. There are a number of different ways to handle this, but here's just one example. Get anything pierced you want. My love for you doesn't depend on what you look like. But wait a minute, don't do it until I get a good picture of the way you are right now. I love that. Kind of subtle, right? Like an anvil. So all this is to show you that there are some really creative ways that we can have conversations with our kids that don't include threats. The problem with threats is that we always create a resentment and resistance. Kids know when they're being threatened. You use it as a last resort. You don't want it to be your basic MO, what you do every single time. There are times when we have to solve problems, all right? There's times when we have to solve an issue, whether it's over what time a child should come home, from a date or from the movies or whatever. Um, there's times when we got to get together and solve this thing. And one of the concepts I learned about is called the solving circle. And the solving circle is literally, if you could imagine a big circle, and that three things must enter the circle. Now, one of the things is, one of the two parties involved. So let's say your child enters the circle. That means I want to help solve this problem with you, mom or dad. And the other parent is a second of the three elements. Okay, so now we've admitted that we want to reach the solution. If we won't enter the circle, what we're saying is, I don't want to talk about this. I'm turning my back on you. We're not going to talk. That's called avoidance, and there will be no solution, and there'll be no resolution. So the first thing that has to happen is an agreement. Okay, we're going to try to work on this, even though my concerns are different from your concerns. So what's the third element? The third element is a mutual concern for the we, a mutual concern for the relationship itself. So you see, in the solving circle, there's you, there's me, and then there's this we, there's the relationship itself. And if all three elements are in the solving circle, what we have then admitted to each other is, while I would like to have my way on this issue, I don't want to end up with a solution that damages our relationship. The relationship is more important to me than this issue. Now that's real big boy and big girl stuff, okay? Because if either party does not treat the relationship itself as one of the most sacred things in the solving circle, then people will fight to the death just to have their own way. I want to be right and I need you to be wrong. But a solving circle says our relationship is the most important thing. It's bigger than this issue. So let's always keep our relationship in mind, because we don't want to sacrifice that. I hope that makes sense to you. So all relationships are influenced by the language and the strategies we use. On the one side, there will be, as a byproduct of certain language and certain strategies, we will, by choices we make, create resistance and resentment. The better alternative would be if we chose language and strategies that created respect and cooperation. Now, these are opposite ends of the spectrum, you realize, right? These are opposite ends of a continuum. If every time we have little struggles in our family, we keep creating resistance and resentment, we are casting our relationships farther and farther apart from each other. But if the goal is to always nurture respect and create cooperation, even though we disagree, then we have a chance of the relationship always being rock solid no matter what. So here's what creates resistance and resentment. Take a look at these behaviors. Anytime that we choose as our first choice to compel, punish, manipulate, boss, coerce, criticize, blame, complain, ridicule, nag, and shame, I can guarantee you that those behaviors directed at another person will create resistance and resentment. It's just automatic. On the other hand, if you chose these behaviors to show that you care, that you're listening, being supportive, even negotiating, encouraging, trusting, and accepting, respecting, welcoming, to esteem, that means that, to lift up and to empower, we increase the chances of respect and cooperation. And we can teach our children to use these same strategies and talk with language that supports those, or we can teach them the left-hand side of the screen. We are going to teach them values are not only taught, they are caught. And children, in fact, human beings in general, we are great copycats. That's what we do best of all, is we copy, we emulate. And it's so important that we choose strategies that build respect and cooperation rather than ones that create resistance and resentment. This is how you bulletproof a relationship. If not, what you will find is that external control over the course of a long period of time, you're going to win some battles, but you always lose the war. That's the problem with external control. The opposite being internal control means teaching our kids the personal responsibility to control themselves from the inside out so that we don't have to choose outside in. I thought I want to win the war. A few battles, I'd rather lose a few battles but win the war. Have my children trust and respect me long into their later years so that that is a rock solid relationship. I'm sure you feel the same way. Glasser's quote really struck me. He said, "It is our attempt to control that destroys the only thing we have with our children that gives us some control over them, and that's our relationship." Read that. Read that. Do you hear what it says? It's our attempt to control that destroys the one thing we have that gives us some control. In other words, the security of the relationship, the integrity of the relationship, the power of the relationship actually gives us some influence over our kids that can be very beneficial to them. So, I have in my library a lot of books, and some books I cherish more than others. I'm not saying you're going to agree with everything in this book. I don't agree with everything in this book, but I found enough nuggets of truth in this book that I wanted to share some of the premises of William Glasser's work. It's very good stuff. It applies in parenting. It applies in the workplace. It applies in coaching and sports. It applies everywhere. Human beings like to have a choice. And if we can learn to be wise as to how we grant choices, and I do not mean unlimited choice. Please make sure that you understand, I am not saying that children should be given unlimited choice. You wouldn't say to your child who says, "Give me the keys to the car, Dad, I'll make good choices," and he's only 12 years old. You would say, "No, you don't have the skills yet to drive that car." By the same token, let's say your 17-year-old comes to you and says, "I'd like to borrow the car and drive it." And you've noticed that your 17-year-old, even though somehow he got his driver's license, you question the skills of that child to be driving under certain conditions. Maybe it's weather, things like that. And if you are relying only on the fact that they have their license or that they're old enough, you might still make a bad choice. It should be about skills. There's times when I believe with our athletes, for instance, what do you want for breakfast? Well, I'd really like donuts and French fries. I'm sorry, that's not one of your choices on game day. In fact, in our house, that was never a choice for breakfast. My wife would say, "I know you got a big game today. What would you like for breakfast? I've got scrambled eggs, and I could also do oatmeal. Which would you prefer?" "No, I'm sorry. Donuts are not on the menu." So this is what we mean by being a responsible parent and giving choices that have boundaries. No differently than if you said to your child when he jumps on his tricycle and you live in a neighborhood, you might say, "You can ride around the houses here in our little area, 4 houses, but no, you may not cross the street." "Oh, that's not fair, Mom. That's not a choice." Yes, it's a choice. You can go anywhere you want to within this area that I've mapped out for you. Go ahead, feel powerful, but you cannot cross the street. As children get older, we give them bigger circles to operate in. We give them bigger boundaries and fewer boundaries. But no choice means that yes cannot exist unless no is an option. Think about that. The ability to say yes, I will do this for you, cannot exist if no isn't an option. That's how important choice is. So I want to encourage you at this point to jot down any questions you have, and I'll do my best. I am not William Glasser, but I've read his work and I've practiced some of these things, and I would encourage you to go ahead and use the chat function. That's the quickest way that I have access to your questions if you use the little instant messaging. I can also check the There's a thing here for Q&A, and I can look to see if there's anything there. Here's a question in the Q&A. It says, how do we go about repairing a damaged, let me just scroll here, relationship with our child when we have engaged in poor practices? Okay, great question. And I feel that I have an answer for you on this because I have been asked this so many times. And by my own mistakes in my parenting, I thought, have I screwed this up forever? Am I doomed? No, the answer is you are not. And here's why. Children have an incredible capacity to forgive us. Just like my guess is you have forgiven your children for the times when they have sort of messed up. What would you say to your child if your child came to you and said, man, I know I've been messing up a lot lately and I really want to do better, and I'm just telling you now I'm going to try to do better. Well, you give them a big hug and you'd say, thank you so much. Your children would do the same thing if you went to them and said, I've been reading some stuff. I listened to a webinar, and I've been thinking, and I think there's some times when I haven't responded as well as I'm capable of, and I want to do a little bit better in how I talk to you, or a little better in these situations, and you can be specific. When we humble ourselves as parents and admit to them that we are still learning, we are human beings who are still learning, and we sincerely want to do our very best for them, all we're doing is teaching them that that is part of the human experience, humility, and that we can right a wrong by apologizing, asking for forgiveness if necessary, and making a new effort. If we don't show our kids that we're capable of saying I'm sorry, how do we ever expect them to say I'm sorry to someone? Remember, they're copycats. So if we want them to demonstrate humility in their lives, they have to have seen it in us. That's a great question. And the truth is, with conversations like that, you can definitely repair relationships. Thanks for asking that one. Let's see if there's any other questions. Again, the chat function is a great place for you to type out a question if you have one. And I will, like I said, do my best to answer it. And I'm not afraid to say I don't know the answer. Okay, so here's another question. Let me scroll here a little bit. This is always a little tricky with this thing. All right, this question is, I'm having trouble. Oh, here it is. Okay. How can I help my child gain focus? I had a problem of focusing, and that never got better. I can see that in my child. Any tips, please? Okay, this is a question about how do we help our children get better at focusing. One of the things that I learned was that there's different styles of focus. Some people have the ability only to focus on, like, think of a wide-angle lens, and they can see the landscape, but they can't zero in on the fine points. It is a style of focus that will serve them well in certain situations. Think of a baseball player who's standing in the on-deck circle. Now, good baseball players can look at the entire field and say, okay, there's runners on second and third base. That's runners in scoring position, and we only have one out. So they are focusing on the large picture. Now they walk up to the plate, and they have to zero their focus in on the threads of a ball coming at them at 80-plus miles an hour. They have to narrow their focus down to hitting a round object with a round object. Not all ball players have the ability to have both kinds of focus. Some of them see the context of things but cannot zero in on the ball. Other ball players are great at seeing the ball but not always the context. And I think that sometimes we have to accept the fact that a child's focus and their ability to focus is a skill. And there's also some style in that that's part nature and nurture. My advice is to love them no matter what. to help them experiencing different degrees of focus by encouraging them to sometimes zero in what do you see, but don't expect them to have the length of focus. In other words, to focus for long periods of time. Our whole society right now, starting with the MTV, generation, wants to see images change every, what is it now? I've heard it's like it used to be every 7 seconds. Now it's every 4 to 5 seconds. An image on TV must change or kids get bored. We have really, the way we are functioning with our media, it's hard for kids to pay attention for longer periods of time. And I'm not one that has the expertise to answer that question, so I will kind of hold back from saying any more on that. But I know that kids have different durations of focus and different styles of focus, and it doesn't necessarily make it bad or good, but they need our love and support no matter what. Yelling the word focus at them doesn't help. Consider what is distracting them. When I teach concentration to athletes, the first question I ask is, what steals your attention? What is it that robs your attention? And now I ask this question, is it something you see or hear? Is it external coming at you? Or is it something you're thinking about, meaning it's internal? Is it a worry? Is it a fear? What's stealing your attention? Once you know what's stealing your attention, is you can come up with a plan for focusing on things that would be better to think about and better to even see. So, wow, that's a tough one, and I wish I was better trained to answer that. I think that's one that our whole many people in our society are wrestling with that one. All right, here's a question from the chat function. How would you handle a child's addiction to gaming? Well, prevention is the best key, of course, is to prevent that from happening. If it's a true addiction, once again, that would fall outside of my area of expertise, and I would ask you to seek some resources and professional help about how do we deal with a true addiction. But I can say this about the whole video thing and gaming and everything else. Video games and anything having to do even maybe with Facebook and all of that, it's part of a category of life that could be called entertainment. And there's a certain amount of time that can be allocated to that activity in every person's life. But that's only one of about 8 major life accounts. There is this thing called my intellectual growth. In the case of a child, it's school. It is their physical well-being. So that's how I take care of my body. So I got my mind, my body. I've got responsibility to take care of both those. Now there's also my emotional well-being. And what am I doing to take care of that? Then there is my social life. There is my family life. There is my community involvement. I'm up to 6 so far. Learning how to manage the limited funds I might have at my disposal. That's number 7, right? And then there's my spiritual life. So there's 8 different life accounts. And only one of them is called recreation, or entertainment. So physical would fall with like sports and recreation. Entertainment is one of 8 or 9 different life accounts. We would never tell a child that it's okay to spend a disproportionate amount of time on any one of those. I don't want you studying 8 hours a night on your homework. That is going to warp your sense of being a human being. I don't want you to feel like you have to spend, a disproportionate amount of time in any one of those, but I also will not allow you. In other words, I'm going to teach you by setting some limits. You may do video games in this range, this many minutes to this many minutes. Your choice, but those are the parameters for your video game, or in other words, your entertainment. If you want to go to the movies tonight, then that takes up your video game time because that's just a different form of entertainment. If you want to watch TV, that bites into some of your entertainment time that's allowed for today. So we give kids a range of time and we ask them to manage all their life accounts. All of them deserve a certain amount of time. None of them can occupy a disproportionate amount of time for their value. I hope that that makes sense to you. We have to help our kids see that they are the general manager of a life. And we're trying to teach them to be a good manager of their life and their lifetime and their life accounts. And so now that some things are just out of whack. And, what would happen in your life if you have a responsible job and a family you're trying to take care of, but you're out playing golf 40 hours a week, right? And you're not a pro golfer. we we would look at you and say you're spending a disproportionate amount of time on golf given the other responsibilities you have. That's what we have to teach our kids. Um, Here's another question. I want to read this one. Um, if a child is not setting goals at school or in sports, should a parent encourage it, or is that pushing our agenda on them rather than letting them just progress at their own rate? This is a really interesting one because I know some kids are just naturally sort of goal driven and they like the idea of goals. They've experienced early in their life that setting a goal leads to reaching a goal and it's very satisfying, but not all kids are sort of that way, partially because they're not so motivated in that arena, right? The more motivated you are, the more hungry you are, the more inclined you are to set goals. But let's say it's not something that really you have a burning desire for. Mom and dad come along and say, you got to have a goal. No, we feel like having a goal. All right. How good do you want to be at this is a question you can ask. What do you aspire? What would be satisfying and fulfilling for you? How good do you want to be at science, math, English, sports, right? Music, whatever it is. See, by asking the question, how good do you want to be at this, you have opened the door of choice. Telling a kid how good they must be, you must reach this goal, you have robbed them of choice. I also learned that if a child is willing to have a goal, that they need to set it, not us. My daughter was a world-class water ski jumper, and I was thinking about setting a goal for her, and then I realized, oh my goodness, if I set it too high, that's going to be discouraging because how do I know? She knows best. But on the other hand, if I set it too low, that's not good either. I think I better let her set the goal and let her manage that process. So I think we want to teach our kids about goals and how they work. We want to teach them through our own life examples. For instance, can you give your child an example of a goal you set and reached? What sacrifices made that happen? What discipline allowed that to go from fantasy to fact? See, if you don't have some examples from your own life of you setting goals so that you can tell the story, then don't be surprised that they're not goal-oriented. By the same token, if you have a story to tell, don't finish the story with, so you should. We have a tendency to should on our kids. You should do this, you should do that because I did. No, tell the story, relate to them what you learned, and then let them choose. Do I want that story to be part of my story? It's really calls for great patience on our part because, we know that it takes hard work, right? My son caught fire with his sport at age 4. He played baseball from age 4 to 24, 1 year as a professional. At age 4, he was the most motivated kid on the team. There was no question about whether he was going to practice or not. He wanted to be first one there, last one to leave. My daughter, on the other hand, in her sport, just thought of it as sort of a nice social kind of thing until about age 12 and 13, and then she caught fire. And all of a sudden, we couldn't keep her off the water practicing. So in the early years, I'm thinking, you're not practicing enough. You should set some goals. You should get out there more. And my wife held me back from overplaying that message because we had to wait until the fire came from within instead of from the outside. And now at 35, she is still a professional athlete. She's one of the top 3 professional women wakeboarders in the world. So be patient with this. You never know where it's going to go, right? She's the Lindsey Vonn of wakeboarding. And she's competing against 20-year-olds. Wow, you've had some great questions tonight. I really appreciate this. It's so much fun when people have just fascinating questions. I don't see any other questions at the moment. We have been at this for 55 minutes. That's pretty exciting. It's flown by for me. I hope it has for you. If there's anything else I wanted to share with you, I guess it's this page. We are offering a special training on October 25th, 26th, and 27th. There's three options. One is to come for just Friday and enjoy some sports leadership training. This would be especially helpful if you're in business or if you're a manager or if you're a parent or a coach. If you want more than that, if you want to have access to the Growing Champions for Life workshops for parents, coaches, and athletes, this would be especially helpful if you are a professional coach or a sport administrator. Then you're going to want to come for day 1 and day 2. And if you want to actually build your own Growing Champions for Life business, we've actually created an opportunity, an entrepreneurial opportunity for people to literally go out into the world and teach what I've been teaching for the last 10 years. And that would mean that you would purchase the license to use Growing Champions for Life materials, platform, logo, website, the whole 9 yards. I created this because I had people come up to me and say, David, I want to do what you're doing. This is a small group of people. It involves an application. And as you can see, there is an investment involved. But if you're interested in any one of these three options, day 1, day 1 and 2, or day 1, 2, and 3, write to me at david@growingchampionsforlife.com. My email address is david@growingchampionsforlife.com, and I'll be happy to share more information. Once again, next month, our webinar will be on Thursday, October 17th. Give your child courage for change. I hope this has been helpful to you. I will send out the recording to the webinar tomorrow because I have recorded this whole thing, and we'll send out the recording so that you can have access to that. Go back and watch it again or share it with somebody else. So thank you very much. Good night, and feel free to go to our website and take a look at some of the other resources we have there. Good night.